Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Garcia. I'm the Curator of Education at SAR's Indian Arts Research Center. Today I will be going live with one of our past NRA interns, Katherine Barry. So we're just waiting for Katie to join in here. And this will be our last live until April. We'll be taking a little break for the month of March as we have our Indian Arts Research Center speaker series taking place that month. So definitely check out our website for more details on the amazing lineup of speakers that we have planned. Let's see. Try and invite. Oh, here we go. Hello. Wow, it's so nice to kind of meet you in person.
You too.
Back up here a little bit. So I've actually met all of our other interns that I've had on our Instagram live series, but you and I actually haven't met in person, but
No.
Katherine and I have been corresponding a bit over email, and then we had a phone call. So it's nice to kind of meet you.
You too. One of these days we'll get to meet in person.
Yes, definitely. So I'll just read a brief bio really quick, just so our audience members can hear a bit about you. And you prefer to go by Katie, correct?
Katie or Katherine, either one's fine.
Okay, perfect. So Katie has her BA in History and Anthropology from William and Mary. She was a 2014-2015 Anne Ray intern, and she is currently the Museum Collections Registrar at the Institute of American Indian Arts Museum of Contemporary Native Arts here in Santa Fe, so not too far away.
No, not at all.
And you sent me some more information about what you've been up to between your time as an Anne Ray intern and your time at IARC. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that path that has led you back to Santa Fe.
Of course. So after I finished my Anne Ray internship, I actually became a collections intern at the Stark Museum of Art and W.H. Stark House in Southeast Texas. That was a year-long internship, and then at the end of it, I was hired as assistant collections manager, and then when the registrar at the time left, I was promoted to registrar. So I was there for about 5 years, just a little over, in a variety of collections and exhibitions capacities. So the object handling training and the database training, particularly in the Anne Ray internship, really gave me a foot in the door at the Stark cultural venues. So then I decided it was time to head back to the mountains, and I loved the idea of working with contemporary Native art and working directly with artists and communities. That was something that I loved about SAR and really wanted to be able to do again. So
that's great. And I'm reading here that you also worked prior to the internship at the Tomaslik Cultural Center or Cultural Institute.
Yes, so that's the Museum and Cultural Center for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Pendleton, Oregon. And that largely comprises people of Umatilla, Walla Walla, Cayuse, and some Nez Perce descent. So I grew up actually in Pendleton, so just a few miles away. That was my first significant museum internship. Actually, was at Tomaslik, and then they kept finding projects that I could work on. So my first job out of college was actually on contract there as an archival project contractor. So we were working on processing an archival collection that was actually on loan from University of Oregon Archives, the papers from an anthropologist that had worked very significantly with the Confederated Tribes, and we got a grant to be able to process the sections of his papers that related to that community, and then make copies and send the originals back. So that was a wonderful collaborative project between the university and the Tomaslik staff. And then I worked for them for about a couple years on a variety of special projects. So the first internship there while I was in college definitely changed my trajectory in terms of which aspects of history, anthropology, and then later museum studies I wanted to follow.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had always been interested in working with Native communities or if your experience at the Tomaslik Cultural Institute really influenced your career path.
It really did. I mean, given where I grew up, I knew about um, Native peoples and that the vanishing race idea was a trope and
Mhm.
not real,
Right.
things like that. But it really wasn't until I was in college in Virginia and realizing that there were people that I went to school with that like had never encountered a Native person that they knew of or
Right.
didn't realize that there were state reservations in Virginia, even though at the time there weren't any federally recognized tribes. The Pamunkey are now recognized, but um, that sort of opened my eyes to how real that idea of Native peoples as this thing of the past is in the
Mhm.
U.S. I hadn't grown up around that, and so working at Tomaslik, especially as a history and anthropology major, um, really gave me a completely different framework in terms of the approach to museums and the significance of working with source communities and the fact that it's not this stagnant, things just come into the collection and we never bother to talk to anybody about them or learn the
Mhm.
context. And so that really helped me reframe really my role as a non-native museum professional. It's not my story to tell, but it's my job to make sure that the people's whose voices need to be recognized are recognized, and to help maybe facilitate some of those conversations. So it's wonderful, to be here at IAI where that is so at the forefront of
Mhm.
everything the organization really was founded to do. So I'm learning a lot, about different ways that we can make Native art relevant and have the entire approach to Native arts come from an Indigenous perspective.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually also went to college in Oregon, and so I've been to
Mm-hmm.
Masalit a couple times,
Oh,
and
great.
it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. And I think that was probably the first place that I ever went where I saw, native stories being told from a native perspective, and it
Mm-hmm.
totally influenced my career path. And I just would love to go back one day. It's a really beautiful place.
It is definitely.
All right, so now I would love to hear more about your current role at IAIA. Could you share a little bit about what your daily life is like in your current position?
Yes. As with most people, it's a little different with COVID. So we have less on-site researchers than we usually would. But normally we have a lot of students, faculty, and outside researchers coming in to utilize the collection. So um, the museum collection, we do loan, we do exhibit to some degree, actually at the museum, but the really bigger role of the collection is as a teaching collection, as an academic resource, particularly for students to be able to come and draw inspiration. So my job is to keep track of everything in the collection, paper files, digital files, maintaining the database, basically knowing what we have, where the information about it is stored, and where it is at any given time. Um, so my role is as the Museum Collections Registrar. So I'm less directly involved in the exhibition side of registration, unless it's an exhibit largely from the collection that we're supplementing with outside loans.
Mhm.
So, registration is a lot of that really technical attention to detail that makes most people really nervous or bored, but I get excited about it. Um, so hats off to Jennifer Day at SAR for first making me realize exactly how fun databases are.
Uh-huh.
And then um, my next boss at the Stark actually really took that in another direction. So I learned how fun databases can be, and that registrars play a key role in helping everybody else get the information that they need about the collection. So it's similar here. And then we're a small staff, so we do a lot of job sharing. Everybody wears a lot of hats in terms of rehousing the collection, preparing works to go out on loan or on exhibit, image requests. It's a long list.
Yeah, wow. I
We
know.
work together.
Anytime I need to know anything about the collection or any specific pieces, Jen always has the answers. So I'm just constantly impressed by registrars and the amount of organization and knowledge necessary to do that job. Let's see. And you already talked about this. What had my next question was, how has your work changed during the pandemic? Do you work a lot with student workers on site, and has that changed as a result of the pandemic?
We do work with student workers. There are only two full-time collection staff in our department, so we rely very much upon our student workers. And we have been able to retain a few, including some recent graduates, actually, during the pandemic. But we've had very intense COVID safe protocols in place. All of IA has actually. And so, we're limiting how many people can be in a space at one time. Everybody's wearing masks. We're wiping down everything we can wipe down. So, it changes the workflow a little bit. And, we try to stagger people where we can. We do have a little bit more remote flexibility when it comes to things like the database, but not so much the hands-on work, keeping that going.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know too much about the internship program, we've recently modified it a little bit in the last year so that the interns spend about a quarter of their time working with a local partner organization for 1 day a week. And so this year, both of our interns, Emily and Sean Dean, spend 1 day a week working at MOCNA, which just seems so fun. And up until this point, they've been working with Manuela Welloffman, but I believe towards the end of March, they'll be transitioning to working more with collections and registration with Katie and Tatiana.
Yes, they'll be joining us for the last couple months of the internship 1 day a week. So we have plenty of collections projects to help with. It's one of those things that if you haven't worked in collections, is sort of hard to visualize, but we're constantly upgrading, finding different storage solutions, adding more information to the database. So even when both the artwork and the information about it are fairly well organized like it is here, there are always ways that we can continue to improve. So we're always doing that.
Amazing. And it looks like Emily is tuned into our live, and she says she's excited to work with you.
Oh, we're excited to work with you too, Emily.
For anyone watching, if you have any questions for Katie or questions for me about the internship program, just feel free to type them in the comment box and we'll be sure to get to them. Let's see. Do you have any projects that you've completed recently in your new role at MOCNA or at II that you're especially proud of?
Yes, I talked a little bit about the database. We actually just completed a database migration to a new system. So I wasn't here for the early part of that since I just joined the staff in October. But I've been part of finalizing that, and we're working on some data cleanup so that we can get as much of our collection as possible accessible to researchers and to students online. So that's one of our big goals for 2021 is to make that information accessible. And we also spent a lot of time in December and January getting ready for the Linda Loma Haftawa exhibition at MOCNA. That's about half from the MOCNA permanent collection and about half loans from other owners. So collections was very involved in that because so much of it, was our work. And if you haven't seen that exhibition, it's fabulous. You should go see it. MOCNA has limited hours right now, but we are open. If you go to the website, you can find the information to pre-order your tickets. So
Yeah,
that was a big
that's a lot.
undertaking.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right after I got here, managing about 11, I think, incoming loans. So,
Wow, that's a
mhm.
lot.
Yeah. But
Let's see.
mhm.
Um, and I feel like you kind of talked a little bit about this, but do you have any goals that you've set for yourself in this current position?
Mhm. So as I've mentioned, I'm kind of a database geek. So really, it's a shared goal, I guess, between myself and the rest of the institution to get the collection online. There's a lot of really basic information that we already have out there on one site, but we're hoping to really make this a more robust research experience, um, you know, both on campus and off campus.
Mhm.
Um, there's also a lot more that I want to personally just learn about the artists in the collection, and um, the different processes. I mean, where this is an art school, that puts kind of a different spin on the collection. A lot of our work is from students and alumni, and we continue to collect from current students, faculty and staff as well. So there's a little bit of a learning curve for me there, but I'm really looking forward to it.
That's great. Okay, and I have this quote from you from, I think it must have
Mhm.
come from your application. Um,
Probably.
but you said that you would like to continue working with tribal communities to preserve heritage and share their history and stories in their own words. Can you talk about how the ANRI internship um, prepared you to continue or to, yeah, continue down that path?
Absolutely. Um, I would say the biggest influence in terms of my current position, as far as what I learned from the NRA internship, would be the importance of incorporating Indigenous knowledge into your record keeping so
Mhm.
that that can reframe how the work is presented, how the work is talked about. That's one of the things we were looking forward to with this new database is a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we can incorporate Indigenous knowledge, um, both community as well as from the artists themselves. There are options to incorporate more than just the English language, for example.
Mhm.
That was something that I know was a huge undertaking for SAR during my internship. Um, the community visits were happening. I believe we were working with the Acoma collection at that point. The collection reviews were a tremendous influence on me. I really appreciate the idea that we can make sure that we have the information, but only the information that's appropriate for
Yeah.
museums to have, because that's not always, sometimes the information we want is not information we actually should have.
Mhm.
So, how we can reframe that, how we can make that information accessible. Also, just the experience of working with community members and with artists. Seeing people come into the SAR collection and be able to relate back to work, that they can recognize just from the style was created by someone in their family. Seeing elders come in and, teach language lessons, incorporating the objects. Um, Artists come in and be inspired by the work. It's very moving to see that happening in real time. And again, it's something that happens in a different way in more traditionally Western constructed museums. So that idea of it doesn't have to be this us and them, and nobody can come in and interact with the artwork, like that completely changed the framework of how I approach collections when it comes to Indigenous work. If that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. Now, that's one of my favorite things that I get to do is hosting community visits, which we haven't been able to do so much this last year.
Yeah.
But I know Jen and Steph and our collections team are continuing on with our community review sessions virtually, which I just think is so amazing that they're
Awesome.
continuing with that important work. And for those of you watching, we have our Acoma collection up on our e-museum. If you go to the SAR website, and you can find the comments from the community review sessions in those object files online. And it's, as Katie said, all appropriate information that the community has deemed appropriate to share with the public. And so it's just a really fun resource. And I just love looking at all of the Acoma pottery. It's so beautiful.
It really is.
Let's see. Okay, so when you went into the Anne Ray internship position, did you already know that you wanted to be a registrar, or did your experience as an intern shape your path?
I knew I wanted to work in museums, and I was pretty sure I wanted to work more on the collections or archives side of things. At Temeslict, I'd done a little bit of work with the object collection, but more so with the archives. So I was really looking forward to that additional object handling experience and the record keeping on that side of things. So I would say SAR definitely solidified that that was the area that I wanted to go into. I'd had a little bit of a background in museum education. I was a tour guide in another life, most of my college career. So, which I think actually in a lot of ways makes me a better registrar, because I'm thinking about the end user and not just how does the information make sense to me, but
Right.
who's going to use this on the other end and how can I make it accessible for them. So that was one of the things I appreciated about the internship was we got experience in a lot of different aspects of museums work, direct hands-on experience, even some small project managing experience, which really helped me to see collections was definitely where I wanted to be. But that I liked being on a small staff where everybody does a little bit of everything.
Right.
And really enjoyed the registration part. So Jen kept finding new projects for me when I'd finish up something she'd assigned, because I was super excited about it. So that definitely influenced my later career.
And you've mentioned, I think in every institution you've worked at, they've been like pretty small sizes, and so all the staff members kind of help each other out. Do you appreciate that in the Anne Ray internship experience, you had the ability to develop or to gain experience in multiple different fields?
Definitely. I think as much as museum professionals, we all try to develop a specialty, but unless you're working in a really large museum that has, a team of 30 registrars that are all doing different things, there's going to be overlap. And even then, I would assume there's still a lot more overlap than people think. I think that that those opportunities to work directly as a staff to problem solve, to get experience in different areas than maybe the one, we're planning to focus on. Again, I think the larger context is important, especially when you think about museums, whether you're more exhibition focused or research focused. Like the goal is taking care of these works, but so the public can enjoy them. And, if we get too lost in just one side of that or the other, we've sort of lost half of our mission.
Right. Yeah, I am so happy that I've developed some experience in collections and registration. Otherwise, I feel like I would just be totally lost sometimes, having conversations about the database or, archives, things like that. So I agree, it's definitely very helpful. Let's see. What did you enjoy most about the Anne Ray internship program?
I think we've covered a lot of it. But again, that diversified experience and the level of support from the IARC staff. For as busy as they are on their own projects, everyone really made sure to devote time to training the interns. And there was a good balance of, I'm going to walk you through this process and teach you this really specific thing. And then, okay, you've showed you can handle that. Now go work on this project on your own and come to us with questions. I think that's a hard balance to strike with an internship. A lot of them are very specific, one project focused because that's the need of the institution, or they're all we're going to train you how to do this specific thing, but there's not a lot of opportunity to, you know, sort of manage small projects like curating the pedestal displays in the vault and things like that. So I think that that balance was helpful in terms of professional development. And it's just such a fun place to be, you know, that scholarly community. That my particular year, there was a little bit more emphasis on us spending time with the resident scholars as well. So that was an interesting experience as well, that helped us kind of think about museum work within the larger scholarly context, and being that, you know, museums on the side that make some of the academic information a little bit more processable for the general public.
Right, right.
So.
And did you have an opportunity to interact with some of the artist fellows while you were on campus as well?
I did actually. And a couple of them I'm still trying to meet up with safely now that I'm back in San Jose.
Oh, that's so nice.
But yeah, no, we did. Probably not as much looking back as like I might have liked to or might have learned from, but given the short duration of most of the artist fellowships, you know, they have to focus so much on their projects. Most of them were pretty open to, you know, to office hours, but you know, trying to make times when, you know, I wasn't devoted to one project coincide with when they weren't, you know,
Right.
intensely working and needing to focus, you know, could sometimes be interesting.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's so great that you've stayed in touch with some of your cohort from.
Yes. Yes.
Had you been to Santa Fe before you came here for the internship?
I had not. I had always wanted to, but had never made it there. So, yeah.
And well, okay, so what was your favorite thing about living in Santa Fe as an intern, and has it changed now that you're back in Santa Fe again?
I mean, as an intern, it was, well, it was nice to have housing provided.
Yes.
And you know, being so close to the plaza and the other cultural institutions. At the time, I was coming from a smaller town that had some arts resources, like more than anywhere else in our region, but not certainly nowhere near to the degree that Santa Fe does. And I've always liked the balance of the arts and music and theater and cultural events with the great outdoors right there. So coming back, I definitely appreciate being back in the mountains. That was something I missed, being on the Gulf Coast. You know, different types of nature, but I really enjoy being back in the mountains, and looking forward to when more organizations can be open and we can have more events in Santa Fe. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pick one thing.
I know, I agree. Yeah, that is one really nice thing about living in Santa Fe, especially over the last year, is that there, you know, are so many places to go outside and be alone, but you know, still experience the beauty of this
Yes,
place.
yes.
Let's see. Okay, for our audience members, there's still time to ask a couple of questions if you just type them in the comment box. And then I think I just have a few more for you, Katie.
Okay.
Let's see. Can you speak about the importance of these types of learning experiences for early career museum professionals?
Absolutely. As with a lot of professions, especially post 2008, it can be difficult to get what would have once been termed an entry level job. Museums are like a lot of nonprofits, where it's difficult largely because people are short staffed and need most positions for people to be coming in with a certain level of experience. You know, I've been on both sides of that. I've been the recent graduate desperately trying to find a job, and I've been the person hiring who's like, I need somebody that I don't have to train from the ground up. You know, sometimes we're fortunate, like with internships, to be able to do both. So I would say after college, I spent 4 years almost in either contract or like longer paid internships, like the NRA internship. And then it was kind of a right place, right time, was part of how I was hired at the start. I happened to be there at the time that they were ready to hire an assistant collections manager. And they were pleased with my work. So the timing was part of that. But internships like the ANRAE that really let interns do object handling, do registration, like the kinds of projects that you can't really get until someone, authorizes you to do those projects,
Right.
Where it's supervised, you're learning the right practices, you're learning the museum theory that goes behind a lot of it, but that core hands-on experience is key. That's also one of the things that I appreciate about the collections department at MOCNA and I is that that's part of the goal of offering work for students so that, it helps us, yes, but students that are interested in a career in museums, or even, we have non-museum studies majors, for some of the studio art students to really get an understanding of, down the road, if their work's displayed in a museum, how might that, how does this whole process work? Or how do I handle artwork? How do I deal with shipping? The kinds of things that it's harder to learn, on your own. So yeah, hands-on is key. Education is certainly important, but especially with some of the more technical sides of museum work, like registration, like exhibit preparation, there are some technical hands-on skills that is really hard to get in a direct museum context without these kinds of internships.
Right. And Amy asked a really great follow-up question. She says, is there any experience you gained at SAR that you didn't get elsewhere that has helped you in your career?
I would say up until recently, at least the direct work with communities. And I'll say that with the caveat that Temeslik was a tribally owned museum. So I was working with the community there. But in terms of a non-native run institution that housed predominantly a native collection, that was the first place that I'd seen more of the framework of letting a lot of those collaborative projects be native led. And I mean, problems, case in point, the way I just phrased that, letting native people, inviting native people to lead projects on their own work, right? So that was kind of the first place that I'd had the opportunity to do that at an institution that was not native run. At the Stark, we were starting to do some of the reviews to get us to that level of collaboration. Our collection was mostly like late 19th through mid 20th century and was geographically more removed from the people whose work is represented in that collection. So we weren't quite as well placed as SAR to be able to do that kind of work. There was an awareness that it needs to be done. We just, like a lot of institutions, weren't far enough along in the process to really move that forward, but there's been a lot more, progress on that in the last few years. So, and I placed a little bit differently since it's a contemporary collection. So that level of, particularly with a historic collection, backtracking and realizing, here's how this should have been handled in the first place. We're going to fix that now.
Right. All right, and then I just have one last question for you, which is, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about a career in museums?
I would say, as aforementioned, that more hands-on experience you can get, the better. It can be really hard to find the paid internships. If you're still in college, finding ways to do part-time internships during the school year or during the summer, if there are any museums near either your school or your home. Now with a lot more, digital options, there's more opportunities for remote work, certainly, than there was when I was in college. My first internship at Temeslik basically started because I was emailing multiple museums and universities near my home just saying, does anyone need a summer research intern? Because I'm going to be home and I need something to do.
Right.
And somebody who was actually a professor at one of the nearby colleges who also, did contract work at the time with Tomaslik said, you need to talk to them. And so that, their openness to, we have tons of projects. If you want to do one, that'd be great, So a lot of museums advertise internships, especially the paid ones, sometimes unpaid. Really, you have to take the initiative and just reach out. And, if you know the area you really want to get experience in, let them know. If it's just general museums interest me and I want to learn more about them, can you give me a project? Sometimes, like, don't be afraid to reach out, I guess is what I'll say, because museums always need the help. And especially if you're willing to be flexible, you may find somewhere that that can really give you that experience and shape your career. So if you're out of college, same thing, like be willing to, as I hate that like do the time phrase, but it's real in most professions. Like, don't be afraid to do those, year or 2 year at a time internship or contract jobs. Again, that's assuming a certain level of financial stability. That's the sad thing, about getting that experience. And it's not just in our profession. But if you have the means to tough it out or to do that, as a side, a side job or side project, even volunteer work, anything that gets your foot in the door. A lot of times smaller museums are able to have volunteers do more like higher levels of work because of the staffing. So that's always a place to start. And they'll train you because they need you.
Right. Yes, that's great advice. Thank you.
Welcome.
My first museum I think I had on my resume, I was a volunteer, but I was doing coat check. But as long as it was on my resume, I think it made a difference. So I can definitely attest to what you're saying, that just getting any experience and as much as possible is super important.
Yeah. My only experience before I graduated, other than working with objects in like the archaeology lab, was giving tours in a historic building on campus. But that was the visitor services side that said, okay, you understand what museums are about. Now you can learn the other side. So yeah, everybody approaches it from a different angle. That's what's been the most fascinating for me working in museums is I've never encountered someone else who had the same journey into this profession that I did.
Right.
It's always different.
Yes, that's so true.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it's been so great talking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time. For our
Thank you.
viewers, our internship applications are due March 1st. You can go to internships.sarweb.org. And also, Katie and our viewers, I hope you tune in for our speaker series coming up this month. You can find some more information on our website, and then we'll be posting on social media as well. All right. Well, Amy says thank you. She looks forward to meeting you when it's safe to gather again. Me too. And Alicia also says thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thank you guys for having me. I'm happy to help pass it on,
And Robin says Katie is awesome.
So is Robin.
Amazing. Yes, I would love to welcome you back to IARC safely in the hopefully near future, and looking forward to meeting face to face also in the near future.
Absolutely. One of these days.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thanks, you too. Thank you everyone who watched. Let me know if you have other questions.
Yeah, and feel free to send us any messages as well about Katie or the internship program. We'd be happy to answer those questions or point you in the right direction. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
Bye.